History of King James Bible topic, Discrimination. Presented by CBBC Outreach New Zealand and Singapore. This lecture examines the subject of textual criticism as it relates to the biblical text, particularly that of the New Testament. The word criticism comes from the Greek word krino, which means to judge. The term, biblical criticism, refers to the process of establishing the plain meaning of biblical texts and of assessing their historical accuracy. Biblical criticism is also known as higher criticism, as opposed to lower textual criticism, historical criticism, and the historical critical method. The major concern of this lecture is with the field of lower textual criticism.
Text criticism is far less subject to blind speculation because it focuses on real historical evidence such as the Greek manuscript that are copies of the original biblical works, and it commonly employs sound forensic techniques that are often used when examining ancient documents. The primary goal of the text criticism is to attempt to ascertain the contents of the original words as composed by biblical author. Text critics often refer to this original word as the autograph. The secondary goal is to trace the history of transmission from the autograph to the pool of manuscript that we possess today. Skeptics like to propagandize that the scriptures were copied so many times they cannot possibly be trusted today because they contain so many errors. Ironically, text criticism is a strength of the biblical research. It's never a weakness. It's always better to have a lot of copies rather fewer copies, even though an increase in copies necessarily includes an increase some mistakes.
From now, let us make some clarification. First, what is skeptic like to refer as error as hardly ever intentioned attempts to mislead readers away from the original message of the biblical authority. Second, many of what skeptics refer to as error are referred to by text critics as variants because they do not substantially alert from the message of the biblical text. Consequently, these variants are unintentionally mistake made by the copyists and are obvious to a biblical researchers when compared to the rest of the manuscript evidence. In the other hand, there's hardly ever really instead to mislead a reader. Instead, many of these variants mislead of errors are obvious and therefore never been really considered as variable reflections to what the biblical authority originally written nor change the message of the biblical text.
From Genesis to Revelation, every word of God is true, a light to every generation, tried and tested through and through. The hope of all who died believing, the greatest story ever heard. The Holy Bible still remains the final word. The greatest volumes written don't contain the kind of power I discovered.
And the main target is the crowning achievement, which is, of course, the 1611 authorized King James Holy Bible. That is the fruit of the Reformation that the Jesuits want to destroy above all, because until they do that, they cannot be sure of getting indeed the entire world, and especially England, back under the thrall of popery.
In 1844, a German scholar named Tischendorf traveled to Rome and arrived at St. Catherine Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai in Egypt, where he found of what to be hailed as the oldest complete known New Testament. The manuscript he found would be named Codex Sinaiticus. Oddly, it has more correction than any other manuscript in biblical history. Years later, a second manuscript emerged from the Vatican Library named Codex Vaticanus. The Vatican book also said to be more ancient than the manuscript used by the Reformers.
Tischendorf claimed there were some 14,800 corrections done in the manuscript. Is that true?
It sounds about right. Sinaiticus is the most corrected manuscript of a Greek manuscript of the scriptures. Vaticanus now has a very strange appearance. When you look at it as a sort of manuscript expert, although you know that people tell you that it's a 4th century manuscript, it actually looks like a 15th century manuscript. And there's one very simple reason for that, is that almost the entire text has been overwritten by a 15th century scribe.
Vaticanus and Sinaiticus are the two Greek manuscripts that would be embraced in the 19th century as older and more reliable than the texts used by the Reformers.
Westcott and Hort would combine them into what is now known as the critical Greek text that would be used for biblical translation throughout the 20th century.
Challenge to Westcott and Hort theory. Westcott and Hort versus Textus Receptus. Which is superior? Westcott and Hort suggests that for 1500 years the preserved Word of God was lost, until it was recovered in the 19th century in a trash can and in the Vatican Library. Were Westcott and Hort saved men? Westcott and Hort were founders of the Ghost Society in 1850s, pursuing knowledge of ghostly encounters with spirits.
Conclusion: modern textual critics favor the older text, which is the Alexandrian codices, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, which are being used by our modern-day Bible translations. As Christians, it is our job to stand firm on our faith, especially on our King James Bible, to defend it against the critics. This subject helps us to increase our faith regarding the history of our King James Bible and why it shines amongst our modern-day Bible translations. Proverbs 30, 5-6. Every word of God is pure. He is a shield unto them that put their trust in him. Add thou not unto his words, lest he reprove thee, and thou be found a liar.
Every word of God is true, a light to every generation, tried and tested through and through.